Harnessing the beauty tonight is Erika Rushton here. Erika works for Plus Dane Group, which is one of our leading housing associations, but she began her life as a visual artist, acting as artist in residence on area regeneration schemes. She's been in Liverpool for over 25 years and has worked on joint projects with the City Council, looking particularly at economic development as a cultural industry specialist. For the last 3 years, Erika has been involved in the Beautiful North, which is a huge scheme trying to improve the quality of life in the whole of the north of Liverpool, and that's a massive partnership organisation. And Erika is chair also of the Baltic Creative CIC, and the work that is happening in the Baltic area of the city, the regeneration, has been absolutely astounding. And again, Erika's been very much at the core of that. And she's also chair of the Granby 4 Streets project, which is another very significant group in the city, bringing life to another.
Well, it would be terrible if it were all agree, wouldn't it? So I should disagree a little bit just from what's been said. And I would suggest that we don't start always with the buildings, but perhaps with what we do in them. And it's been my experience that it is the activity that happens within a space that first creates the dreams and memories that Claire talks about, but also enables a building to have a future. I've worked for about 25, probably going on 30 years in the city now, and for 10 of those I worked for the City Council. And I would say that every month, if not every week, there was a group of people who wanted a building. But they didn't just want a building, they wanted a building and the money to pay the electric bill and the money to refurbish it. And they wanted it to be a simple looking thing. They didn't so often have the activity to fill that building and give it purpose and meaning and to contribute to the city's rebuild of its own economy. But there have been some successes on that. So just taking a few examples in my experience, Miles Faulkner, who runs the Camp and Furnace down in the Baltic Quarter, when he first looked at what is now a very successful venue there, he was offered some grant, but he refused that grant. And he explains why he refused it, was because he didn't know what he wanted to do in the building. And the approach they took was that they tried stuff out, they did stuff. And the stuff that worked and could pay its way, they kept doing. And the stuff that didn't work, they stopped. And over time, that building has evolved as a successful venue, and it now pays its way and pays the salary of those within it, and contributes to the culture and the future economy of the city. I think probably my thought in that is just some of the grant regimes and assistance regimes we work within help us or hinder us. If Miles had had to say what he was going to do with that building, he would then have had to stick to a plan, and he probably would have failed, is his suggestion, because he couldn't have stuck to the plan. His original ideas were not, they didn't work. Nigel Ward, who first invested in Northern Academy, was then looking for a second building. And you'd think in Liverpool there's lots of empty buildings. Here's a guy who's got some investment and wants to create an urban technology college for 14 to 19-year-olds, and he's got the cash. But he couldn't get a building. His quote is, you know, when you want an empty building, nobody's got one. And he ended up going into the CUC, down in the Baltic Quarter, because he could get his hands on it, and for no other reason. It was not even on his shortlist when he began looking. And so how we make some of those buildings available, and I don't know the reasons why some of those buildings aren't available, but perhaps they're sitting on balance sheets at a value that is more than it is worth selling them for because they've been borrowed against. That's only a theory, I don't know that. But how do we make some of those empty buildings available to some of those people who want to try doing things and doing stuff and making stuff happen in them? In terms of Baltic Creative, I was invited to be the chair of Baltic Creative before it existed, and actually nobody campaigned to save the tin sheds that are now Baltic Creative. There was nobody on the picket line there. There was nobody from Save who turned up at that event. And quietly, but in quite a considered way, a small group of people brought those buildings forward. We lost the money at one point. Joe helped us get it back, just as the change of government went on. But it's a pretty cheap refurb, and they're not buildings you'd write home about. But actually, what's attractive about them is that there's 60 plus businesses, 250 plus people who are doing stuff in them. They are making their own economy happen within this city. There's two young guys who fly drones and take photographs flying through places, and they began in a bedroom, and I met them as they'd just got back from Finland. Prior to that they'd been in India, and every bit of business they got is because somebody stuck their head around the door in a place where 250 people are making things happen, not because it's a beautiful building. In terms of generating activity, I was involved in running a car park in the north of Liverpool. This was on derelict land, not in a building, but on land that wasn't used, that the City Council donated for us to do stuff on. But that car park, I've now said that what I really need is a green coat and a little hat and a banner. And I probably don't even need to run a car park, because everywhere we've gone to run a temporary car park, or indeed a community garden, or some other kind of visible meanwhile use, some people have turned up and said, we could do something there. So as an advertising scheme, to get other people joining in, actually doing something is perhaps more important than campaigning. And some of what I like about this project is it has the potential for people to do things in buildings and remember what's happened in buildings. And some of that doing and remembering might give us some ideas for the future as to how those buildings could be used for us to have a more vibrant and lively economy. I think it's worth mentioning some ideas from elsewhere, but first one from here. There are some people who are now very actively doing something called crowdsourcing, and they crowdsource ideas and they crowdsource money. And an example of that, just very recently, was Kate Stewart, who crowdsourced cash for the flyover, because the City Council had said it was cost £4 million to pull it down, it's not required anymore, and she suggested that maybe they save themselves the £4 million, which didn't exist in the first place, and we could make it into something else. And last week she was successful in crowdsourcing her first 40,000 to start putting an event on the flyover to see if there's a different way of using that in the future of the city. It is a city that was built for far more people than currently live here. So we have to imagine it with more people here again to fill the buildings we've got. And so I think that, as Claire said, really, it is worth borrowing some ideas from elsewhere. In terms of that crowdsourcing ideas, there's a really interesting festival happening in Birmingham this week. It is entirely about crowdsourcing ideas and refining those down in empty spaces and buildings and bringing investors to invest in those ideas and those activities. And we're hoping to borrow that idea with those people and bring it to Liverpool in the autumn this year. In Barcelona, going a little further afield, over 10 years ago, they decided they wanted to be the most cosmopolitan city in Europe. So instead of when everybody else was worrying about migrants, or as we might term them, immigrants, they said, we want to be the most cosmopolitan city in Europe. And within 5 years, they became the fastest growing city in Europe, and they are becoming a very full city. And that welcoming that they offered to people from across Europe meant that their schools were full, and their buildings were full, and their hospitals were full, and their doctors were used. And so I think there's something in that for us. And finally, there was a mayor in Spain. I'm going to say this because I've got the mayor sitting next to me. But I can't pronounce his name. Jose was his first name. But this was a town that was losing population and had a really seriously ageing population. And so they held something called the Children's Caravan. a weekend event when they invited people to come and camp and caravan in their town and showed it off to say, this is what we've got to offer if you want to move here, and then put stuff on. They did stuff in buildings. So they're just 3 examples from me of the ways in which we could animate the beautiful buildings we have with ideas and enabling people to make things happen.